RPG enthusiasts, it's me, captcorajus, and I'm back with a first look at the new 5th edition of the Player's Handbook for Dungeons & Dragons. I just ran a game Sunday with the new starter set rules, and now that I actually have a Player's Handbook in hand, my enthusiasm for this new edition of the game is off the scale. In my previous reviews, I spoke about my hopes for this new rules edition and what seemingly insurmountable odds Wizards of the Coast would have to overcome to truly succeed with this new rules set. In the interim, since I posted that review, for the very first time in RPG history, another role-playing game, Pathfinder, has usurped Dungeons & Dragons from the top-selling RPG. The popularity of Pathfinder and the quality that Piazzo has put into the 3.5e clone is really spectacular, and there's no doubt that this new edition of the game will really have to be something phenomenal to even hope to compete with it. First, there is the large segment of gamers disenfranchised by the 4th edition of the game who have gone on to other games, and then there are those players who have actually loved the 4th edition of D&D. And now, how will they feel about this new edition? As I said, for the very survival of Dungeons & Dragons as a viable game, it would seem that Wizards of the Coast would really have to pull off some sort of design miracle to make this a viable and survivable edition. So did they do it? Let me start off with saying, yes, I think they did. And I'm going to give you the reasons for that in just a moment, but let me preface this with the fact that I have only played one game session with the new rules and spent the better part of 3 days reviewing the new Player's Handbook. So I say for certain that they've succeeded, but there's also 35 years of gaming experience on my part, and from what I can see, Wizards of the Coast has very innovatively addressed problems with not only 3.5 and 4th edition, but every edition of the game, and not only fixed them, but actually been innovative with some of the new and interesting game mechanics. As you know from my previous reviews, innovation is something that I look for in a game, and in my opinion is the hallmark by which a great game is evaluated. And this new edition really has to be something special. So, how does this new edition move the hobby forward? Well, let me start by saying, as I paged through the rulebook, section by section, absorbing all the changes, the words, "Oh, that's awesome," and "Oh, that's cool," and "Oh, I really like that," came out of my mouth again and again and again. It's been something that I've really been surprised at, and it's been a long time since I found myself engrossed in a new rulebook, much less a D&D book. So this was a welcome change. First, let's talk about production values. Sewn bound and gloss covered, the book looks great, as you can see here. The pages themselves have that vellum paper look without making the print itself difficult to read, and the artwork is simply stupendous. But of course, Wizards of the Coast is known for its quality production values, and for $50 retail, this book had better look the part, and it does. Wizards of the Coast has really raised the bar very high for itself, and 2 years and 175,000 playtesters later, what I hold in my hands certainly reflects an earnest effort and genuine work product of such a massive undertaking. Yes, the cover art is very exciting, and I love the nod to the first edition of the game with descriptive text on the credits page, as well as the amusing disclaimer in very small type below, which reads as follows. Disclaimer. Wizards of the Coast is not responsible for the consequences of splitting up the party, sticking appendages in the mouth of a leering green devil face, accepting a dinner invitation from bugbears, storming the feast hall of a hill giant steading, angering a dragon of any variety, or saying yes when the DM asks, "Are you really sure?" I have to laugh at that because the reference to old school modules is certainly there for those in the know. So, Captain Courageous, what is it that's exciting about this new edition, other than the pretty artwork and quality binding that has you so excited, you might ask? Well, let me tell you, there are so many innovating and interesting tweaks to the rules, tweaks that not only fix previous failures of the past, but add a fun new dimension to play. Things have been greatly simplified, but the mechanics are creative enough to allow for detail without letting crunchiness bog things down. So let's get to the meat of the review. What the heck is in there, and why do I want this thing? All right. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna kind of page through here with the bookmarks that I have, and on screen you'll see some slides that I've put to correspond with my my impressions. In the preface, Mike Merles goes into some detail about the appeal of Dungeons and Dragons and what Dungeons and Dragons has meant to a lot of people. It's a really well-written preface and worth the time to take to go ahead and read through that. And then the next section that I find interesting is where we talk about the 3 pillars of adventures, the wonders of magic, and of course we get into part 1, creating a character, and the very interesting artwork that starts that off, as you can see here. Now I'm going to skip on to page 15. And here we have the character advancement chart here for experience points. What's important to note here is how quickly you progress through the first 3 levels of play. It's only a total of 900 experience points to get to level 3. Then, of course, after that, it kind of tapers off, and you need 2,700 to get to experience points to get to level 4, 6,500 to get to level 5, and so forth. So it becomes more difficult, but not overly so. Only 355,000 experience points getting you all the way to level 20. Now, next to the level progression, what you want to look at is this neat little statistic here called proficiency bonus. This is really the key and core to the new system. No longer do fighters get a +1 to their attack every level. Every character actually progresses on attacks at the same rate. So you're at +2 for levels 1 through 4, and then at +3 for levels 5 through 8, and so forth, all the way up to a maximum of +6. This is really interesting. Now, as I go through the classes, you'll see that fighters actually get more options, and so do all the other classes. But this is like the basic start. But what this means is that unlike previous edition, even like first edition, but it was ungodly with third edition, where you were at +50 or something at level 20 to attack with one of your 6 attacks. Those days are gone. Now you're going to be in some sort of realm of reality with your attack rolls at higher levels. But you start off pretty darn good at level 1. So level 1 character is actually pretty viable, and you progress to level 3 very quickly, as you can see. So you'll get the feel of early play without having to get bogged down by it, which is something very nice. And when I get into character classes in just a minute, that also becomes very important because of the archetypes that the classes now have, which I'll go into. Here in Chapter 2, we have the section on races, and all the core races are there. Dragonborn from 4th edition are there, as well as Drow elves are included in the elf section. And you have your halflings, and you'll notice that there are sub-races like Lightfoot halflings and Stout halflings included. Humans have traits they can get +1 to all their ability scores, or if you're using the optional feat section, you can gain proficiency in a skill, which I'm going to go over what that means in just a minute when I get to the skills section of the rules. Now, if we skip all the way up to page 45, as you can see, I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly. I don't want this to be a drudgery to go through, but I just want to point the highlights of the Player's Handbook, the things that are exciting, and then maybe when you go through it, you can go through it with a little bit more detail yourself. But we have quite a few classes, everything from Barbarian to Warlocks and Wizards. Yes, the Warlocks from 4th edition are here, but gone is the Marshal. So there's still a viable number of character classes here. And what you want to also look at with the character classes are these various archetypes or paths or what have you, which happen at around the second or third level, depending on the class. In a very real sense, they remind me of prestige classes from 3rd edition. But rather than wait until your 20th level or 24th level to get your prestige class, you're now going to get that at 2nd or 3rd level. With the barbarian character, for example, they have what's called primal paths. And essentially what this is at 2nd level, you choose your primal path, and that will give you additional abilities as you go up in level. With bards, you have your colleges. So depending on you're at 3rd level. So what college you choose is going to determine your character's progression. Clerics have domains. Druids have circles. Fighters have martial archetypes. Monks have monastic traditions. Paladins have sacred oaths. Rangers have ranger archetypes. Rogues have roguish archetypes. Sorcerers are interesting. You have your sorceress origin, which could be maybe you get your sorceress power from a dragon heritage or something of that nature, or maybe some sort of demonic power in your path, in your heritage is what gives you your sorcery. So what you choose there with your sorceress origin will also determine how your powers progress at later levels. Warlocks have eldritch invocations, and wizards have arcane traditions, which are essentially the 8 schools of magic. So that's pretty cool, and you get that almost right away, as you can see, because like on the previous chart, you could see that you progressed with from 1st to 3rd level rather quickly. So you're going to have your 1st level, which is actually pretty good. When I get into spells, you'll see what I mean. And as you saw with your proficiency check at starting out at +2 for all characters, you actually have a pretty good attack. If you have a pretty good strength or dex, then you're going to be adding that to your proficiency. So there's modifiers to your proficiency, so that's going to be fun. Then we get into Chapter 4, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I love Chapter 4 because we get into personality and backgrounds. Obviously, we talk about height and weight, talk about alignment, languages, but the hallmark of this section are personality traits, and these actually come into play. Here you're going to create certain things like your character's ideals, your character's personality traits, a bond for your character, and a flaw, which are defined. And there are quite a few of those given in the player's handbook. In this chapter, there's the acolyte character background, the charlatan character background, the criminal, a folk hero, a guild artisan, and each one of these lists, as you can see here, different traits and give you certain benefits in play, and also other things such as inspiration, which I'll go into in just a moment as well. Inspiration is a new mechanic, and I really like that mechanic, which I'll talk about. Chapter 5 is equipment. Nothing really of note to mention here. It's pretty standard fare from all the other editions. Armor class is important to review here, however, in that there's not significantly high armor classes. In order to get a 20 armor class in this edition, you have to have plate mail and shield. You cannot use your dexterity with heavy armor. You do not get a dexterity bonus. With medium armor, your dexterity bonus is limited to a max of 2. And then you can only get the max benefit of your dexterity bonus with light armor or no armor. So that's interesting. The other nice thing is that there's no penalties for armor types in the game anymore. What they have now is you get a disadvantage for rolls in certain types of armor. And I'll get into advantage and disadvantages as well in just a minute, because that's a wonderful, wonderful game mechanic. Now we get into customization options in Chapter 6, and multiclassing is really well done. If you haven't figured it out, if you're using the same progression for experience and the same progression for attacks using the proficiency system, multiclassing now becomes significantly easier to switch from class to class, because we're talking total character level. Everybody has the same pluses to hit. Now your character classes will give you certain benefits for saving throws, and depending on what character class you're going to will determine that, and that's listed in the multiclassing proficiencies chart, which is something you can read. But the idea is multiclassing is a viable choice, and it's very easy to do, and the experience point penalties of editions past are gone. This section also goes into feats. There are not nearly as many feats as there were in 3rd and 4th edition. Feats have been pushed into the back burner. They're there. You do not get any feats to start off unless you're a human. And then in the future, you get feats whenever you, instead of say an ability advancement. Say at 4th level you get a +1 to an ability. You would not be doing that. Instead you would take a feat. So that's how that works. So you won't be getting nearly as many feats as you did, and the feats are not as pervasive as they were in 3rd edition. Part 2 is playing the game. As you can see, the artwork here is really nice. And then we get into chapter 7 is where you start getting into the real juice of the system, and they're talking about ability scores. Pretty much everything has been relegated to an ability check, and if you play Castles and Crusades and you saw my review on Castles and Crusades, then you know what I'm talking about with ability checks as the main part of the system. Most of your skills now, or all of your skills, are just specialized ability checks. Your class will determine whether or not you have proficiency in a skill. You usually have, starting at 1st level, 1 proficiency in a skill. And then you get your proficient, or 1 or 2 proficiencies in a skill. And then you get your proficiency bonus if you use that skill. Otherwise, you don't. And as you can see here, there are quite a few. There are some skills: athletics, acrobatics, sleight of hand, that type of thing. Now, going forward into the next section, we talk about saving throws. Saving throws, there are now saving throws are simply an ability check in which you're responding to something. And the way that works is, remember that proficiency number, depending on your character class, will determine whether or not you get a proficiency bonus when you make a saving throw using that ability score. Like, for example, rogues get a proficiency bonus with dex saves. So that's how that works. Very simple, very easy to adjudicate. The next section, chapter 8, is adventuring, and that's pretty straightforward, talking about time. Rounds are 6 seconds long, how to move, those types of things. Artwork is still good. And then, of course, we get into resting. Now, here's something that's important to talk about here is short rests and long rests. A short rest is a period of downtime, at least 1 hour long, during which a character does nothing more strenuous than eating, drinking, reading, and tending to wounds. A character can spend 1 or more hit dice at the end of a short rest up to the character's maximum number of hit dice, which is equal to the character's level. For each hit dice spent in this way, the character rolls the die and adds the character's constitution modifier to it. The character gains hit points equal to that total. The player can decide to spend an additional hit die after each roll. A character can regain some spent hit dice upon finishing a long rest, as explained below. So now you can regain hit points depending on using hit dice, which, like if you're a fighter, your hit die is a d10. If you're 2nd level, you have 2d10 of hit dice. So you cannot regain all your hit dice back until you take a long rest, but you can take a short rest and roll. Say you're 2nd level, you could roll 1d10, see how that worked out for you, and if you want, you could roll the other one or not. It's up to you. A long rest is a period of extended downtime, at least 8 hours long, during which a character sleeps or performs light activity, reading, talking, eating, standing watch for no more than 2 hours. If the rest is interrupted by a period of strenuous activity, at least 1 hour of walking, fighting, casting spells, or similar activity, the characters must begin to rest again to gain any benefit from it. At the end of a long rest, a character regains all their lost hit points, so you basically fully heal. The character also regains spent hit dice, up to the number of hit dice equal to half the character's total number. So if you have 8 hit dice, you'll do 1 long rest, you'll get back 4. Character can't benefit from more than 1 long rest in a 24-hour period. So that's an interesting thing. So you can get back all your hit points, but you don't get back all your hit dice, which means it's going to take you longer to heal for a short rest. So that's an interesting rule. I like it. It's not as ridiculous as healing surges were in the 4th edition, but it doesn't make damage from combat something that keeps you out of the game for a week. All right, I did want to talk about inspiration. Inspiration is a rule the dungeon master can use to reward players for the way they play their character. And basically, if you're using when you're using personality traits and ideals and bonds and flaws, when these come into play, when you bring these roles or characteristics into play, the DM can reward you with inspiration. Now, what inspiration does is it lets you give yourself advantage during a roll anytime that you want. So it's pretty simple roll. Now, there are no inspiration points, so to speak. You just have it or you don't, and then you'll have to, once you use it, the DM will have to award it to you again at a later time for your role playing in character. So it's another way of keeping role play in the game in a very creative and interesting way, and it looks like a very fun role. Another interesting aspect of inspiration is that you can share it with another player. So you can give another player your inspiration. So that's pretty cool. So there you have a role that encourages role playing using personality traits, and then also encourages team play, which is also neat. So looks like a fun rule. Chapter 9 is the section on combat. Surprise is relatively straightforward, if you're familiar with Pathfinder, or you're familiar with that type of system, then you know that it's a passive perception check for surprise and those types of things. Initiative is pretty straightforward. It's a dex check. You can go in the order of initiative, and it just goes into that types of thing. And it talks about the maneuvers, action, and combat. Certain character classes do have what's called a bonus action. So that means that you can take a bonus action to do certain move things like a dash. Like the rogue can do a dash, and their bonus action is defined. So what you can do during your bonus action is specific, and you have to consult your character class to see what you can do with your bonus action. Also, there's a reaction action. Basically, what you get the opportunity to move to act outside of your normal combat action and do a reaction, and that's activated by something that somebody else does. Most commonly, that's an opportunity attack, where somebody is moving out of your combat space or moving through it. Now, I did want to talk about ranged attacks. You do not get a attack of opportunity, for example, if you make a ranged attack within 5 feet now. Now, what happens is you simply have disadvantage. And I haven't talked about advantage and disadvantage yet, so let me do that now. This mechanic pretty much eliminates every single modifier in the game. There are no positive modifiers for back attacks. There are no negative modifiers for ranged attacks. You simply have either you have advantage or you have disadvantage or you don't. If you have advantage, what happens is you roll 2d20 and keep the higher of the two rolls. If you have disadvantage, you roll a d20 or you roll 2 d20s and you keep the lower of the two rolls. So that's how that works. It eliminates the need to keep track of a plethora of modifiers, either negative or positive. So other than your core modifiers such as proficiency and ability scores, there are no other modifiers in the 5th edition of the game, which I just think is a wonderful simplification that doesn't sacrifice detail and speeds up play. And how cool is that for DMs, Dungeon Masters? Now, if you want to adjudicate something and you want to apply a penalty, just tell the character you have a disadvantage in this roll, or you have an advantage in this roll. It's not overpowered, but it is, and hey, from a player's aspect, that's a lot of fun. Now you're rolling 2d20, and you get to play with the fickle finger of fate and see how that works for you. So that's a lot of fun. Now, where this comes into play with ranged attacks is that if you're within 5 feet of somebody making a ranged attack, be it with a crossbow or a spell, you're not provoking it like you did in previous editions, either an attack of opportunity or an opportunity attack. You simply have disadvantage. It's also important to note that there are no such thing as touch attacks or touch armor classes anymore, or a flat-footed armor class. That's eliminated. That's gone. Instead, if you catch somebody by surprise and you're attacking them, you have an advantage. So you roll 2d20 for the attack. Very simple. You don't have to worry about armor classes. A third type of armor class because of somebody's flat-footed or whatever. Another interesting thing is ranged combat if you're casting with spells. No need to have a touch armor class because your core attack rating is so sucky that you can't hit anything without this special modification. Now what happens, you are attacking at range with a spell, you're going to use your proficiency bonus, which at first level is +2. And if you're a wizard, for example, you're going to use your intelligence modifier. So if you have a 16 intelligence, that's a +3 bonus. So now you have a total of +5 to your attack. And for certain spells like cantrips now, cantrip spells you can use whenever you want, unlimited. And they are actually pretty good spells. For example, Ray of Frost does a D8 and reduces your opponent's movement by 10 points. So you can use that at range. As a first level wizard, you have around +5 to attack. You make your attack, and if you hit, you're going to do a D8 points of damage and reduce their movement by 10 feet, and you can use it as much as you want because it's a cantrip. So you're immediately a very useful character, even at first level, and some power. And wait till I tell you about Magic Missile. Okay, so now we get to the section on hit points and healing and stuff like that. There are no negative hit points anymore. So there's only 0 hit points. Now, if you take a number of hit points of damage in a single round that equals your hit point total in negative numbers, you're dead. So if you have 10 hit points and you go to -11, you're dead. Otherwise, then you go into what's called death saving throws. And essentially, you're going to make a DC 10 or better. So there's no modifiers. It's 10 or better. You're in the hands of fate now. And if you fail the roll, you put a little check mark on for the death save, if you in the fail column. And if you make the success, you put a little check mark in the success column. If you have 3 failed death saves, then you die. If you have 3 successful death saves, you stabilize and get 1 hit point. Very simple. It's fun and it's dramatic. It gives the rest of the group time to get to you and stabilize you before you die. And it adds a little bit of fun and randomness to the game. So that's always interesting. Then we get into part 3 with the rules of magic and chapter 10, and it just talks about spellcasting. Rituals are still here, and they pretty much work like they did in 4th edition with any spell having the ritual modifier. You don't have to take up a spell slot with a spell like that. Instead, you simply take 10 minutes to cast it using the ritual option. So that's pretty cool. And as I said, cantrips can be cast pretty much at will without using a spell slot and without being prepared in advance. Basically, the justification for this is repeated practice has fixed the spell in the caster's mind and infused the caster with the magics needed to produce the effect over and over. A cantrip spell level is 0. So even though these are 0 level spells, they are still useful. As I said, Ray of Frost is a 0 level spell, and it does a D8 points of damage. So that's pretty darn cool. And of course, we go into range with spells and components such as verbal, semantic, material, duration, and things like that, which are not all that different from previous editions. Just a little bit of detail here and there to talk about 5th edition and how it works within the context of the game, but it's nothing amazing or ridiculous or anything like that that's going to surprise you. It's pretty straightforward. Magic Missile. Let me talk about this spell, and I'm going to talk about this spell because it's a very popular spell for a first level beginning wizard, and because it also encompasses a new mechanic in the game, which you're going to want to know about. For Magic Missile, you create 3 glowing darts of magical force. All right, this is the first level. So you get 3 darts. A dart does 1d4 plus 1 damage to a target. The darts all strike simultaneously, and you can direct them to hit one creature or several. So that's immediately cool. And then at higher levels, okay, when you cast this spell using a spell slot of 2nd level or higher, the spell creates 1 more dart for each slot level above the first. So if you use a 2nd level spell slot for your Magic Missile, it will now cast 4 daggers, each one doing 1d4 plus 1 of damage. And let's say you did 5 level, you put it in a level 3 slot, it's going to do 5 daggers for you, each one doing 1d4 plus 1. And what you'll see is spells in the past that they might have had different spells for more effectiveness, like Cure. For example, Cure Light Wounds. And there's no more Cure Light Wounds or Cure Medium Wounds or so forth. Now there's just Cure, and it does a 1d8 of heals a 1d8 of damage. And then at higher levels, you put it in a higher slot, and then it does an additional die of healing when depending on what slot you put it in. So that's you'll find that that's pretty much what they've done with that, which I think is a nice innovative way. You just put the spell in a higher level slot to get the additional dice of effectiveness. So that's pretty cool. Conditions, combat conditions are still here. So if you're familiar with 4th edition, that's not going to be new to you what these are. However, how they work has been greatly simplified. And once again, this is the benefit of the innovative advantage and disadvantage system. Generally, in just most cases, condition will either give you advantage or disadvantage in certain situations. And so basically in Appendix A, it just goes over what game effects these conditions have. Appendix B is a kind of a little mini deities and demigods section talking about the different gods of the multiverse, which is handy if you're playing a cleric. And then in the appendix after that is the planes of existence. If you are familiar with the infamous or famous Wheel of the Planes from 1st edition, this will be immediately familiar to you. And if you are familiar with 4th edition, you'll be happy to know that the Feywild and the Shadowfell are still here. So those were, I thought, one of the nice things about 4th edition was the Feywild and the Shadowfell, and that has retained itself in the 5th edition of the game. Then there's a Appendix D, which is some creature statistics. And if you want to look at this, and I'm going to show you here the Tarask, and I want you to look at the statistics. So I'm going to put a comparison of this creature in 3rd edition as opposed to how it is now in 5th edition. And I got this off of EndWorld, so if you want to check them out, that's pretty cool. It's just a preview of the 5th edition monster manual. So this is actually from the 5th edition of the manual. What you can see here is, like, for example, in 3rd edition, you needed your attacks for the Trask were at plus 57 melee, some stupid number, whereas we're at plus 25 here, which is significantly less. And that's really something that I think they've addressed with the 5th edition is statistic creep. They've gone to great length to keep the numbers reasonable. So not only, so you have a pretty good number, you have pretty good starting numbers at 1st level, but it's scaled so that it doesn't get ridiculous at level 20, even as I showed you with the proficiency system. So that's an innovation with this game, and one that I think that makes it very playable and will keep the fun going for a very long time. And then here we have Appendix E, and if you're familiar with the Dungeon Master's Guide from the 1st edition, this inspirational appendix will look very familiar to you. Obviously, it's been updated to include new literature that's come out since the release of the 1st edition Dungeon Master's Guide, but it has a lot of the same reading suggestions, so that's pretty cool. And then there's the index, which is in very, very small type, and it's significant, so they've got a really comprehensive index in here to tie it all together, and I think it's just a wonderful game. It looks very playable. It looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. There is overwhelmingly a lot of good here, and in my opinion, very little bad. I am interested in seeing the monster manual, and of course, it's clear that those rules will be fleshed out in more detail in the Dungeon Master's Guide. And gosh, now I'm really kind of excited about getting them. So, regardless of what edition of the game you play, amazingly it seems as if there's something here to like for everyone. It's obvious that 2 years and 175,000 playtesters greatly benefited this rule set. It's concise, it's detailed, it's cohesive, it's innovative, and most importantly of all, it's fun to play. Well, that's about all I have for now. I hope you've enjoyed this review and found it interesting and useful. I will also post a playtest overview of my group's foray into the Lost Mines of Phandelver, which is the module from the starter set. as well as continue my review of the world of Mystara in my retro review section. Just as a side note, we did hit 200 subscribers the other day, right as I got my hand on the new Player's Handbook. The subscriber number clicked over to 200, which I thought was neat, and thank you all for that. Please feel free to share this review and post your own thoughts in the comments section. If you are not a subscriber, please subscribe. Check out my other reviews and my series on retro RPGs. Also, if you are interested in seeing how the adventure of the Mines of Fendelver went Sunday, which is the adventure from the starter set, my friend Jim has a blog entry on that on his blog, The Dice Are a Lie. Please feel free to check that out. So, until next time, YouTubers, as always, game on.